Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday. That means another Facebook Live from Alzheimer's Orange County. My name is Melissa Klabe. I'm the Director of Education here at Alzheimer's Orange County, and I'm joined by Ben Allen, as I am many mornings. Hey, Ben.
Good morning, Melissa.
Ben is one of our programs and education specialists, and we love talking about communication. So that's what we're going to do this morning. Of course, we're going to put a little bit of a different spin on it. So thank you all for joining us. And before we get started, I want to thank this month's sponsor of our Facebook Lives, which is Crown Cove Senior Living. Crown Cove is located in Corona Del Mar. They're a retirement community and they offer assisted living and memory care. They have an intimate senior campus, beautiful, located on PCH, overlooks Little Corona Del Mar Beach, lots of on-site amenities. And they offer a safe, positive residential environment with the best in memory care. On their website, their associates don't just provide the assistance residents need, but they're trained to bring joy and a sense of family to each and every moment by staying focused on what individuals can do and not on what they can't do. And so that's a perfect segue into today and what we're going to talk about with how we adjust, getting past the words. We know that the words are what often gets lost first if we're talking about kind of a typical Alzheimer's progression. Language, word finding abilities, communication, those things are all impacted pretty early on. And so it can be challenging for friends and family to figure out, how do I shift? How do I adjust? How do I best communicate with this person now? And so we're going to get into that today. And we would always as always, we invite you to comment, to bring your questions. We love when this gets interactive, so please don't hesitate to do that. And I wanted to start off with a quote. The stigma of dementia challenges people's identity and subsequently our willingness and ability to connect with them in a meaningful way. And I'm going to come back to this in a couple slides. But I want that to kind of set the stage for today, that a lot of the challenge that we deal with, I think, can be often self-imposed by ourselves and our society, and how we view dementia as, kind of this robbing and taking away, which undoubtedly it does take away skills. It creates a real disability, but there are ways that we can still, seek out the abilities that remain, even when we're talking about language. And so we're going to do our best to give you some ways to do that today. So before we talk about that, though, I'd love for Ben to go through and talk about the real changes that dementia has on our loved ones.
Yeah, I really like that quote because the challenge is to connect, and things are changing. They've changed by the time we get to a point where we realize what's causing all these changes, and will continue to change. And it's up to us. It's our responsibility to figure out how to adapt, because our loved ones are going to have increasing difficulty adapting. And I love this illustration because it helps us to understand what's changing. And when we understand that, it helps to smooth the paths rather than resisting and always fighting the changes, always struggling to be in control, because we really aren't in control with Alzheimer's and all the other kinds of dementia. So what this illustration is describing is damage to the brain as the disease spreads, which is typically first, as you mentioned, Melissa, with short-term memory and language. And that's where we begin to see the struggles that our loved ones have. And it's because of physical damage to the brain. These are degenerative neurological diseases that will ultimately impact the entire brain. And the progression, the appearance of symptoms varies widely, but they generally always include these specific impacts. So in addition to language, at some point, there will be difficulty with rational thought, abstract thought, the ability to do math. For example, all of those higher order of thinking functions are going to be impaired. Emotional regulation is impaired at some point because that region of the brain, the amygdala, gets damaged, and so there may be wide swings in moods that as caregivers we don't understand. But as long as we understand it's the disease that's causing it, not our loved ones trying to be difficult.
Right.
As our coworker Kim Bailey says, they're not trying to be difficult. They are having a difficult time. Every day is just difficult. So another not widely understood impact is on sensory perception. Our brain interprets what's coming in through our senses, our eyes, our ears, our smell and taste and touch. All of those senses get distorted when that region of the brain is damaged and the disease is spreading throughout the brain. Vision becomes a significant factor as the brain has difficulty interpreting all this visual stimuli, and that includes our loved one's ability to see us clearly. And that's so important for communication and connection. And so we have to make extra efforts, as we talked last week when we talked about approach. A really important part of our approach is to make sure that we're face to face and eye level. So that our loved ones have the best opportunity to see our full face, see our lips move, see our smile, our eyes. All of that goes into the communication. And lastly, late in the disease, toward end stage, reflexes and like swallowing and just the brain's ability to support a major organ function will decline and lead to death unless there's some other event, some other disease perhaps, or accident that takes their life. So this is one of those harsh realities that we talk about, but we need to understand what's happening and not always struggle against it. This is real. So far, we don't have any way to stop it, certainly not to reverse it, but we can make a difference in the lives of our loved ones, in their quality of life and ours. It makes a difference for us when we learn how to relate and how to make that connection, to engage more effectively.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking us through this. It's really important. Like you mentioned, it can be sad and, it never gets easier, I think, to hear about the changes. But it's really important for us to understand what's going on so that we can be educated and like you said, learn how to move forward. So kind of in summary and building a little bit off of what you said, I want to talk about, the other ways that dementia challenges communication, the broken connections early on. So you mentioned those very real changes in the brain, and that impacts the way that our brain cells, our neurons talk to each other, right? How our thoughts and our sensory input are processed, and then our ability to respond to our environment and essentially to communicate with others, our needs. Accessing memories, accessing our skills, our wayfinding abilities. Those things are tough. We got to search a different way for them. And so we see frustration in our loved ones oftentimes as a result of this. They're not listening to me, right? We're not listening to them. They forgot what I just told them, right? And so there's frustration on both sides, both with our loved ones with dementia and with us, just this constant kind of battle between us.
Yeah, I want to talk about that impact because it impacts us. It impacts our ability to communicate. Because when our frustration level, their frustration level is going up and stress hormones are flooding our body, we get tense and we're not able to think as clearly. We're not able to express ourselves. And that tension is going to be evident in my face. And my loved one is going to pick up on that. So we have to be aware of that, and really, that's what we want to. A large part of what we want to talk about today.
Absolutely, yeah, great point. So we both talked about our ability to find words is affected early on, which obviously has a huge impact in communication. Distractions are harder to tune out, and you kind of alluded to this with the impacts to our visual and sensory perception. Things that you and I can tune out right now. If my room's a little cold or bright, or if there's background noise, I can maybe tune those things out enough to listen to what you have to say and convey what I need to say. Dementia just wreaks havoc on our ability to do that. And so really, if we're not in a quiet, comfortable place, we're already setting ourselves at such a huge disadvantage for communication. So that's something we need to always be hyper aware of, even in the earlier stages. And then this last one I want to mention here again, stigma, that really reinforces the divide between us. I mean, there's people that talk about kind of from the moment of my diagnosis, I felt like I was kind of othered, right? And now I'm labeled as having this cognitive disability, and people treat me differently. And I want to read a quote from a person with dementia and kind of her experience. Her name's Carrie Smith Henderson, and she wrote a book, and she said, another really crazy thing about Alzheimer's, nobody really wants to talk to you any longer. They're maybe afraid of us. I don't know if that's the trouble or not. I assume it is, but we can assure everybody that we know Alzheimer's is not catching. And I love that she kind of, put a little witty spin on the end there. It's not contagious. You're not going to give it to anyone else. But again, her very real sentiment and the way that she felt that people treated her differently. They were hesitant to communicate. And I think most of us, either people with dementia or us having, loved one with dementia can relate to that experience where friends, family, it becomes awkward. People don't know kind of what to say, how to be around that person anymore, even in the early stages. And it can be, I think, hurtful for that person if they feel like they're in a crowd and they're not really being addressed or talked to. And so how do we build up our skills in such a way to be more as inclusive as possible, right?
And part of the response to that stigma is embarrassment.
Yeah.
Especially around people who may not know about the diagnosis. And if it were me, I may not want them to know. Yeah. So I want to come across as if everything's normal. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying really hard to hold things together to make it look like everything's normal. And again, that produces anxiety, floods our body, our brain with stress hormones. It makes it more difficult to think, to come up with the words just to communicate.
Absolutely. And I jumped ahead a little bit, but I want to read another quote here from a person with dementia. I'll read the full quote. His name is Robert Simpson. He wrote a book called Through the Wilderness of Alzheimer's. And he says, in my mind, one of the most important things you could do for me to make me feel comfortable in a group of people is to include me. Not so much by asking questions, unless you're willing to help me answer them, which I would appreciate, but by including me in your smiles and your eye contact, right? So, I mean, again, I feel like we have these lots of firsthand accounts of people having this same experience of feeling excluded, feeling othered, and we need to do better at figuring out how to best include them. So this brings us to, what do we do? How do we get past these losses of words, right? And we talk a lot about in our classes about looking for the feelings, looking for the meaning behind the words, whether the words are few or the person's talking a lot but not quite making sense to us. We're not understanding what they're saying. We can generally get a sense of how they're feeling, the emotions they're conveying, and hopefully under all of that, what, if any, unmet needs we can look to address for them, right? So I want us to go through these kind of common examples that we see, and if anybody out there has any other, common phrases that your loved one says or refrains that you hear of, and we can talk through those, feel free to share with us. But this is a really common one. Obviously, we hear it all the time. I want to go home. What do we do with that? What does it mean?
Well, first of all, I would hear this often from my wife. In some cases, earlier in the progression of her disease, we were at home, though we had moved a few years prior to that. And I think that disorientation made it difficult, and she wasn't comfortable. Now, I came to learn gradually that expression was really saying much more than those words. So it helped me to learn to not take that question literally. But as you say, what are the emotions behind it? So for example, I would recognize in some cases she was saying, I don't feel comfortable here in this place at this time. I want to go somewhere that is comfortable and safe. And she was referring to me, not in words, but what she was saying is, I just want to be with you.
Yeah.
And so my response would be something like, let's go take a walk. And we get out of that physical space into somewhere that's perhaps quieter. Maybe there's some a pleasant setting that we can go to where you can just breathe. Ah, this is so refreshing. And so we've left that anxiety behind when we left that room. So just leaving one space and going to another can make a big difference. But to recognize it's not necessarily literal, and to not feel like I have to explain, we are home. This is our home, and try to, what we call reality orientation, to orient them to this is the reality. Well, it may be my reality, but it's not hers.
Right.
And so it simply doesn't work to try to convince our loved ones of what we see as real. What's real are the emotions that they're feeling in that moment. And so if we tune into them, whatever that's saying, it may be different for everybody, but for us it is, I'm anxious, I'm uncomfortable, I want to go someplace that feels safe. Now, she might be literally thinking of a childhood home. I don't know, because by that point, she couldn't tell me what she meant by that. And so I have to improvise and try something and see what works.
Absolutely. I think you hit it on the head. I want to go home doesn't necessarily, I want to go to this physical place I'm thinking of. It means the place that I'm in right now doesn't have the attributes that feel like home to me. I don't feel known. I don't feel a sense of belonging. I don't feel secure. I don't feel like I have control. The things that I'm doing are not meaningful to me. It could mean any of those things. And so there's a lot of different ways that we could address this the way that you talked about, perfect, with your wife, just going for a walk, changing up the scenery, letting her feel super connected to you, which was probably, what she was missing the most about home. For others, they may be able to tell us something if we give them a little bit. Tell me, what do you miss about home? What would you do if you were home right now? And that could lead us into something that we never even thought of. Maybe it's just, a particular object or something that they're missing, or, that could tell us something that, we never knew to ask. So there's lots of different ways that we can address that. But I think it starts with not assuming that they, taking it literally at face value, but, prying a little bit deeper and trying to figure out what that person needs.
Yeah. There was one other thing about that question that always got to me, a feeling that I had to solve this and I couldn't. It was just an unsolvable dilemma, which was just caused anxiety, grief in me, that just affected my ability to communicate again. It was so hard to hear.
Yeah.
So it helps to recognize it's not a problem for me to solve. It's an opportunity for me to connect. And to be able to receive that question with that mindset can make all the difference in the world.
That's wonderful. That's a perfect way of looking at it. I want to call my mom. I want to call my daughter. Let's say I want to call someone who's no longer alive, or whoever. But so I want to call this person. They're repeatedly asking. Maybe they just talked to this person 5 minutes ago. What could the unmet needs behind that statement be?
So first of all, we need to recognize that's related to the short-term memory.
Right.
There's inability to remember. Maybe I just talked to my brother Joe um, 30 minutes ago or yesterday? And so my tendency would be to say, what do you mean? You talked to Joe 30 minutes ago. You had a
Right.
great conversation. And if there's no memory of that, then all I've done is introduced anxiety, guilt over the fact that I can't remember. So it doesn't help to try to reorient our loved one to that reality, but take that as an opportunity to engage. And so maybe, in my scenario, it's her brother Joe, and so we can talk about Joe. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe I would say something like, "You really like Joe, don't you?" And all she has to do to respond is say, "Yeah."
Right.
And then I can follow that with, "Joe's a really great guy. What do you like about Joe? Tell me something about Joe." And just follow that, improvising as we go based on what we hear or what we perceive just through our observation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's hugely validating. I mean, both of the home, the calling someone, you're indicating that you're hearing their concern, right? You're not just brushing it off. You're not saying, we just called him, we'll call him later, you're home. That none of that validates the feelings under the statement that they're making. And so, what are they likely to do if someone's not listening to you? You're going to kind of repeat yourself. This person is not
Mm-hmm.
listening to me. I'm clearly not
Mm-hmm.
getting through to them. So I need to keep, until they really hear me. So the sooner that we can validate them in some way, hopefully we can lessen their distress in that way. Picking up the kids, another common one, right?
Yeah. Again, short-term memory. Let's just assume that the kids are grown. They're adults. They may have kids of their own, but for our loved one, their memory is long-term, and so they most likely have a memory of their children when they were small. They're in school, and the responsibility, the feeling um, of being responsible and needing to fulfill that, to go pick them up from school, for example. Um, and and so first is recognize that feeling on their part and acknowledge it. Don't dismiss that. Don't really say, "Oh, don't your kids are grown. What are you talking about?" Um, Denying our loved one's feelings simply intensifies it for them. And so we need to address that. Say, "Wow, you were so faithful at picking them up from school
Yeah.
every day for however many years it was. Um, you did such a great job." And just affirm um, what they've done.
And there's a reawakening of an identity there too, of a caregiver, a parent, and so how do we, now that that identity is no longer able to be fulfilled by going and picking up the kids, is there another way that we can help them care for someone else, or help them feel, or be meaningful, purposeful in another way? And so maybe brainstorming, if this comes up a lot, if every day at 4 o'clock they're asking to pick up the kids, we can validate that, and then we can figure out, how do we now, substitute something else in there where they feel that sense of, caring for someone else, doing something for someone else that hopefully would fulfill that need as well. And that may over time then become the thing they look forward to doing at that time of day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
There's all kinds of approaches.
having a sense of purpose is so important, and our tendency is, to take away things that they used to
Yeah.
do because they're becoming more difficult. And I think, oh, I can take care of that.
Right.
And my whole focus is task oriented. Get it done, check it off. When really what's important again is the connection, the engagement, and paying attention to their emotions.
Yeah. So this last one here can be really hard to hear, difficult for us, I think, and often said in a moment of frustration, right? Maybe we're trying to do something for them or with them. I don't need your help. How do we respond to that? What does that mean? What is that telling us? What do you think?
So first of all, it may be a direct response to the fact that I have taken over roles that they have, probably for decades been responsible for. And so there is irritation, and that can be really hard to hear. And we talk about, well, don't take it personally. Well, that's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
And we may need to acknowledge that I've overstepped, and an apology. I'm so sorry. I was trying to be helpful. I didn't mean to take that away from you. The apology may be all they need.
Yeah.
And if there is some way that they are able to participate and fulfill that task, that responsibility, great. They may not be able to have full responsibility for it, but something, or some substitute, as we were just talking about picking up the kids. Maybe it's about helping, and maybe there's someone else, whether it's in the same community, neighborhood, who we recognize could use some help, and we can suggest that, and introduce that as an opportunity for our loved one to feel like they have purpose. They're making a difference for someone else.
Yeah, the apology can go such a long way. It's so disarming. And that reminded me of, I was watching some Teepa Snow videos the other day, and she went through like 5 different apologies that caregivers should know. I'll just read them real quick. They're short. She said, practice this. I'm sorry, I was trying to help. I'm sorry I made you angry. I'm sorry I embarrassed you. I'm sorry I made you feel stupid. I'm sorry I didn't mean to, but I treated you like a child. And I'm sorry this is hard. And especially that last one, because acknowledging that it's not only hard, it's hard for both of us, right? And just we're in this together. That can go a long way.
And I found to literally say that, to say, I am so sorry. This is hard.
Yeah.
But we're going to get through it. We're going to get through it together. I literally said that one time with Judy, and she said to me, you and me. She totally got what I was saying. We're in it together. It was a beautiful moment.
That's really touching. So we look for meaning behind words. What if there are even less words to look for meaning for, and all we have are actions? These are just a couple that can be really challenging, and we have a hard time figuring out what's going on or how to stop this in the moment. If we've gotten to a point where we see someone calling out a lot for someone, or even reaching out for people as they walk by, and what could this possibly mean? Think about things like the need for connection, the need for reassurance, right? If we feel like we need something, or we need people, and we're not getting what we need, we got to resort to sometimes, getting a little more aggressive with our calls, right? Calling out, reaching for people, especially if we don't have the words to express what we need. And so, as we mention all the time, we should see all behavior, all actions as communication, and looking for the need under them. How can we facilitate connections, not only between us, but also with that person, and things that they might be missing that they loved before, things they love to do, food, music. Connection encompasses all kinds of things in our life. Moving from a home to a care community, that can really, erode someone's sense of security for a while. And so, how do we restore that, and how do we, connect with that person again?
Well, one thing that goes into that is knowing as much as we can about the individual. Now, if it's someone that we've lived with for decades, we know a lot. But it may be that this is someone we don't know very well, and we're have some level of relationship, and we need to learn about them. So that some people have need to touch. They need somebody to to take their hand, to give them a hug, whatever it might be. That's a need. For some people, it's to talk, to find out about other people. Judy was always, one of the most verbal, quick-witted person I've ever known. She still has that desire. You can see it. She just doesn't express it verbally, but it's still there because her personality is still there, just expressed differently. But let's just suppose it's somebody has the need for touch, and so we walk by and they're reaching out for us. And our tendency might be to avoid, and the challenge is to engage instead of avoid.
Right.
Maybe it's, again, depending on coronavirus and what's appropriate in that situation, we might take their hand and hand over hand to provide that connection. Physical touch is such a powerful connection. It expresses, you have my full attention.
Yeah.
Tell me. Now, they may not be able to tell us in words, but the fact that we're face to face, I'm watching closely to perceive expressions, body language, even tone of voice. If the words don't make sense, the tone of voice might communicate.
Yeah. I think something that's really important with this one too, if we've gotten to the point where someone's constantly calling out, reaching out, they're obviously really seeking out the connection. And so making it a point to visit with them, spend some time with them, not only when we need something from them or when they're calling out for us, but in those kind of quieter moments, and just kind of banking that time with them, that, intentional time that isn't predicated on us, trying to get them into the bathroom to, take a shower, or just that, hey, I'm just here to say hi. I'm just here to spend a few minutes with you. Just getting that level of positivity as high as we can have it all the time. I think that's really important to think about as well.
Yeah.
So resistance, or, someone being more physically reactive during care. We should think about themes of autonomy and security. Do they feel a sense of control? Is every time they try and stand up and walk around, are we trying to stop them or redirect them? Is every choice that they have during the day kind of feeling like it's not really theirs? How can we maximize their feeling of autonomy? How can we give them more choices in everything that we do? Teepa Snow, again, I was watching, one of her presentations. She says, I'm continually searching for permission when I'm working with someone. I'm continually getting their, consent and their okay and their input on what we're doing. And that, again, just feeding into those banks of autonomy and giving them a sense of control. And that's something that we do all the time. We can't just do it in the moment when it's a difficult situation. We have to be doing that all the time. And so that those difficult situations actually happen less and less. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, on resistance. Kim says, if you don't insist, they won't resist.
Right.
I like that. Again, it speaks to my tendency to be task oriented. Let's get this done. Let's get it done quickly so we can move on to the next thing that I can check off my list.
Right.
And it can be hard, but I just need to slow down. We talked last week about breathing, preparing yourself before you enter into the engagement. Take time to take a breath, to be aware of our own emotions, and think about, what is it that my loved one may need? How might she react in this situation? Be gentle, go slowly, maintain full facial contact, probably physical connection, and don't, this is, again, easier said than done, it's so easy when we have that connection to get distracted. Oh, I forgot something. I need to go to the next door, to the next room to get something. And I just suddenly walk away and go do that. And our loved ones are left thinking, what happened? Because they probably weren't aware of what I was doing. But I can take the time to say, oh, I forgot to get XYZ. Hold on. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to go get that, and I'll be back in just less than a minute. Take the time to explain that. Be calm, and then go do it. But not just, whoop, I'm out of here. Because that's so disorienting. It feels disjointed to our loved one. We know what we're doing, but if they don't know, it can be very upsetting.
Yeah, we need to recalibrate everything we're doing, right? Speaking of body language, the importance of tone. Do you want to walk us through this?
Sure. A really great study out of UCLA points out that so much of communication is nonverbal. And in fact, body language, which includes our facial expressions, our gestures, as well as our posture, that communicates the most. That's what is the determinant of a successful communication. You know, I might have lots to say, and I think I've communicated. But unless the message is really received, there hasn't been communication. So I have to think about, again, prepare, anticipate, what message am I sending through my body language? And if I am stressed, tense, it's going to show. It's going to come across. That's what's going to be received first. And the rest of the message that I hoped to communicate was simply lost in the noise. And so take the time, slow down, breathe, enjoy the connection that we have. And that may be just a smile, just a gentle touch. So body language, tone of voice. I like to say my goal is to have a smile in my voice. Use that inflection. It's restful. It helps our loved ones to relax. And again, when they relax, when we relax, then communication is much easier. And the study shows that only 7% of the message, the successful message, comes through the words. Now, especially the other way, from our loved ones, what's the message that we receive? The vast majority of that message is going to be through their body language. And it's my job to observe and interpret what I see. I sometimes use the example of the Sherlock Holmes character. And Sherlock Holmes, what was unique about his character is his observational skills. He could pick up just little details and draw an inference from that and follow that would lead him to solving a crime. Well, we're not trying to solve a crime, but the observations and the inferences will lead us to understanding and help us make that connection. So what's the body language saying to us? What is their tone of voice saying to us? As I said earlier, their words might not make any sense at all. I mean, later in the progression, their ability to form words, to use tongue and lips to shape sounds is declining to the point that it may be that there are almost no words that make sense. So we have to depend on other cues to tell us, inform us of what's our loved one trying to say. what do they need us to understand?
Absolutely. Thanks. So more tips here on supportive communication, and there's so many lists and tips, and we have our own, one sheet helpful communication do's and don'ts on our website, which is great. But I liked these particularly for what we're talking about today, and really how to, try to communicate as best we can with limited words. This again is from, some of these are from Teepa Snow. I love when she says, if we're really confused about what they're saying and maybe they're kind of repeating something over and over again, a way that we can validate and maybe seek to understand what they're talking about is actually taking a few of their words. So words that they're saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. Home. Is that home? And taking a few of their words and using it with a question mark, and that can really cue them in, like, hey, this person is listening. They get it. They get what I'm trying to say. And that can, foster a little bit of instant communication there, something that we can build off of, some sort of shared meaning that we have. I think that's a really great tip to try. You can try it and see if it works. It might not work all the time, but if it works some of the time, that's great.
And when we don't understand the word, we can repeat the words that we do understand, leaving a blank, and that invites them to try again. And as you said, they know that they have our attention.
Right.
And so we've got part of it. And the rising inflection that communicates question invites their response to follow up. So it can be very, very effective.
Absolutely. Obviously going slowly, like you had mentioned, just slowing down our general demeanor, what we're doing, also with our communication, offering to fill in the blank. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I just want to go back to the brain changes on this, because they might get the message if they have enough time to process it. It's going to take them longer. So we need to allow them the time, and so keep the message short, simple, and go slowly. Allow them time, and that might involve repeating. I need to repeat what I've said. Maybe it's a question. With Judy these days, any question I ask, I'm phrasing as for a yes or no answer. But even so, there are many times that she won't respond the first time. So I repeat the question and repeat it the same way, use the same words, use the same inflections, and that allows her to continue her processing, and many times then I'll get a response the second or even the third time. I might have to repeat more than twice.
Nice, yeah, being persistent. Offering to fill in the blanks, as we kind of talked about with the first one, repeating some of the words, working together to kind of solve the puzzle. Listening and offering empathy. It's kind of a recap of everything that we've talked about up to this point. Really validating what they're saying, their feelings, matching their tone, so that they understand that you are kind of in it with them. And offering, saying phrases like, it sounds like you're trying to say, or it looks like this, that kind of can tell them, hey, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to, get to the bottom of what you're feeling. Anything else you would add there?
Well, I want to go back to fill in the blanks. We need to be sensitive. Again, taking time when it's clear that our loved one's trying to say something and they're struggling to find the word, to complete the thought. Allow enough time for them to try, but don't let their frustration escalate, because that's just going to block their ability. And you have to use your judgment as to when to offer a word that maybe you think is what they're trying to say. You don't want to jump in and just finish their sentences all the time. again, it's like, I can do that. I don't need your help. Um, they really want to be able to express themselves, and we need to give them that opportunity, and not jump in too soon, but again, not too late.
To dance.
The dance, exactly right. Dance is a great metaphor for the relationship, the connection, the communication. There's so many subtle cues in dancing, and partners need to be closely attuned to each other to pick up those cues. It is a dance. I like that.
All right, we'll use that. So some common phrases we tend to say, and perhaps a better approach. We're not knocking anyone. We know that in the heat of the moment, we all say things that maybe wasn't the best first approach to take. But we learn from it, and we move on, and we figure out what works again for our person. So what we tend to do, we say that R word all the time, right? Remember, do you remember? Remember me? Remember when we went there? Don't you remember we just did that, right? We say this constantly, and it feels like a test, right? And as you say, nobody likes tests. So how can we substitute that out? How can we get out of that habit that we have of constantly saying that? And I like this, better approach. We can flip it on its head. This reminds me, right? Go ahead.
My not being the most verbal person in the world, at least compared to Judy, sometimes I'm just struggling to find something to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think of something, I'm so excited, I want to, and so I say, do you remember when we took that trip to Hawaii in 2010? And I'm so excited about that. But that question, do you remember, is a test. So instead, I can say, this reminds me of when we took that trip to Hawaii. Yeah. That was so great. That beach was so beautiful. So I'm bringing up those memories, and maybe I bring out photographs of that. I mean, I literally have terrific photos from that trip that I could show and use that as a way to stimulate some conversation. But that phrasing makes a difference. This reminds me, it's all my responsibility, the memory. And if it helps, if it elicits some memory on her part, great, but it might not. And that's okay. She's going to enjoy my excitement about talking about it. She's going to see that expression on my face because that memory for me was so rich and positive. That's going to change the emotions, and that's going to come across so clearly as we talked about earlier. So another one, again, we're struggling to find something to talk about. So what did you have for breakfast? That's so common. Did I have breakfast?
Another quiz question.
So first of all, phrase it yes or no. Makes it much easier for our loved one. Did you enjoy your breakfast? You're more likely to get a positive response to that. Does it matter if I know what they had for breakfast? No. I would like to know if that was a pleasurable experience. And often I'll get a positive response. Go ahead, I'll let you take the last one.
So I remember this vividly. There was a phase for a number of months where my mom would tell this very particular story to anyone that would listen. We were in the grocery store, we're in the park, and she just kind of walk up to them and start telling them the story that never happened. But it was amazing how she recounted it the same every time. So it must have been something related to something that happened in her past. I don't know. That was meaningful. And I I was just beside myself. And, the first few times I'm like, that just didn't happen, and she would obviously get upset because that wasn't, the right thing for me to be saying. But after a while, after I saw that this, was a pattern that was going to continue for a while and it wasn't hurting anyone, nobody was, it was a little, we got some weird looks, but, aside from that, so something else we can say when, confronted with something that maybe didn't happen or isn't quite the right story, invite them to tell you more. That sounds really interesting. Tell me more about that. Or, wow, I didn't know that. There's all kinds of things that we can say aside from, discounting their reality, their account of what happened. And we're likely to have a much more positive interaction going forward if we don't. Do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Right. And that's, the key to think about. But it's hard. It's hard in the moment to, just let those things go or even encourage them. It does take some practice, but I can tell you that I was much happier after I adopted the second approach.
Yeah, we so want, some of us want things to be precise, accurate, as perfect. And that perfectionism is just so self-defeating. And so I need to ask myself, is it important that she gets the facts right? Is it going to change her experience that the facts are right? No. That just doesn't matter. My goal is that she have a good day, and probably not an entire day. Maybe it's 30 minutes that we have for this connection. And if I can make that 30 minutes a positive, uplifting experience, then I've been successful.
Absolutely. So kind of recapping here at the end, these are a couple of approaches that you and I both like and we've talked about. One that you mentioned a little bit, you said, we got to improv comedy. This is a quote from Tina Fey: just say yes and you'll figure it out afterwards. So when we think about shows like Whose Line Is It Anyway, that old show where they would kind of play off of each other's interactions, nothing was wrong, right? If someone said something, we didn't say no, that didn't happen. We say yes, wow, that's really interesting, what about this? And we kind of help build off of what they're saying. But the key is just to maintain that positive interaction and to not discount or reject anything that the person is saying.
Yeah, so it's all about adapting. Improv requires that we're totally paying attention. We're totally focused on the person in front of us. And then whatever they say or do, we're going to accept it. So, okay, now let's take it this direction. Improv is such a good model for how we need to learn to relate to our loved ones. And so accept that, practice it, go with it.
Yeah. And the second one that I've heard is talk like a sportscaster, which if you don't watch sports, maybe is not quite evident at first what that is. But basically, they don't ask a lot of questions. What they do more is make a lot of statements and observations, and then kind of give the person that they're interviewing space to respond in whatever way. If this guy's interviewing a boxer, he might say, "Wow, really rough out there," and then kind of like that person, nothing is wrong that they say, right? It's not a question that they have to answer correctly. It's just kind of they are at liberty to agree or disagree or say something else that's unrelated. And it's kind of just a way to keep conversation flowing without this like interviewing with specific questions, right? So again, these things take practice. It's not these skills that are innate or that we're born with. But it can be a good way to kind of, if you're struggling with communication, to mix up your approach and see if that works for you.
Yeah, what I like about this is it's a narration.
Right.
I'm simply describing what I see and creating opportunities for my loved one to respond to something. And then we have the improv opportunity again. So we get a response, then we can go with that and follow that path and see where it leads.
Absolutely. So kind of end with a quote here. Christine Bryden, she's a woman living with dementia. She wrote a book called Dancing with Dementia. She says, "It's the way you talk to us, not what you say, that we will remember. We know the feeling, but we don't know the plot. Your smile, your laugh, and your touch are what we will connect with." I think that's such a great way to kind of sum up what we're talking about here. And that, like the Maya Angelou quote we share, sometimes people will forget what you did and said, but they won't forget how you made them feel. It's all about the feelings. They're
Yes.
becoming more emotional. We have to do the same, and kind of meet them where they're at and make sure that we are, exuding positivity whenever possible. And it's difficult. And I really love this one kind of that we're going to end on here. A new way to look at an encounter with our loved one with dementia. Approach the person with forgetfulness as if you were about to enter the unknown sacred space. Communication is not only about content, it is also, sometimes most of all, about feelings. So just taking that breath, settling yourself, preparing to encounter something that you've never encountered before, because every interaction is going to be a little bit different, and require us to think a little bit differently and react. So kind of psyching ourselves up for that, right?
Yeah, I love the idea of the unknown sacred space. Again, going back to perfectionism, wanting to be in control. I'm deluding myself if I think I ever have been in control.
Yeah, right.
And so to accept that is to accept the adventure. It's an unknown. We don't know what's around the corner. And so we can look forward to that with eager anticipation, rather than fear of the unknown. Wow, I wonder what's around that corner. I wonder where we're going with this conversation. It's an unknown, and when we embrace it, it makes it sacred.
Absolutely. Love it. So just wanted to thank everyone again for being with us. These are a few upcoming classes. We have all of our classes are on our website, alzoc.org. We have a wonderful series called Savvy Caregiver for care partners. 3 weeks, you meet other care partners in similar situations, learn a lot of valuable skills. We would highly encourage that for any care partners. Are living well with early memory loss for people with early memory loss or mild cognitive impairment, and a partner to go through together. Again, very, very valuable. And we can tell you more about that. Give our helpline a call. We have some brain health classes coming up, sleep and nutrition for brain health, if you're interested. And today, starting this afternoon, we have what we call our brain boot camp. It's 2 weeks, today and a week from today, 90-minute sessions talking about memory enhancement techniques and brain health. It's going to be really exciting. So there's still time to sign up for that one if you're interested. Of course, our walk, we encourage you to join Ben here. You're looking at one of our biggest fundraisers, if not the biggest. I can't keep up anymore. But you can join his team if you're interested. You can join my team. You could start your own team, but we would really value your support if you would join us for that. It's November 14th, and you can walk or run from wherever you are. Unfortunately, we can't be together this year, but that doesn't mean we can't be together in spirit. And finally, I want to mention one of our community partners to you, CRC, Family Caregiver Resource Center. They provide services and support for family caregivers. They have specialized information, caregiver assessment, care planning, education, training, support groups, all kinds of things. They have services in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So if you think you could benefit from their services, you can go to caregiveroc.org. And our resources for you, you're obviously here with us on Facebook, and we're so delighted. You can give our helpline a call, visit our website, And again, we are so thankful to Crown Cove for this month's sponsorship of our series. We won't be doing a Facebook Live next week because we have a big webinar next week that we would invite you to sign up for on our website, but we'll be back the following Tuesday. So thank you again, everyone, for being with us today. Thank you, Ben. Any final words?
Thank you, Melissa. It's always a joy to have these conversations and to know, we get comments, even now as comments are coming in, people appreciating what we have to share. And so it's a real privilege to be able to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, and we miss being in person with everyone, obviously, but we're happy to be able to provide this. You can always share these videos with friends as well. We upload them to our YouTube channel, and they live right here on Facebook. So feel free to invite your friends or share with anyone that you feel would benefit. Thank you all, and we will see you next time. Take care, Ben.
Bye-bye.
Bye.